Hello.
Hello.
It's Monday.
Welcome. We hope that you had a wonderful weekend.
We missed you so bad. We missed you so bad.
It was for us. I think it was like the last weekend of the summer type of a feel.
No,
for the
never,
weekend.
never,
No,
never.
boo. Yes.
What are we talking
Okay,
about?
we are letting everyone in. There's still a few more that are coming in very slowly, quickly, depending upon how quickly we click. Okay.
See some pictures or some questions already in the chat.
Yay!
And
Wonderful.
some of those are about Project Tree. When should you start taking pictures of your tree? Like now.
No. And if you'd like, on the course announcement page, we've posted our first weekly tree for Project Tree. So you can go and take a look if you're a little bit uncertain about how the template should be filled out or can be filled out. I'm sure there are multiple ways of doing it, but if we're all consistent, that would be best. So go ahead and take a look if you'd like. We've posted the image of our first week contribution of our silver maple in our backyard. Also, there's some tweeting going on about Project Tree right now, so hashtag Project Tree will get you some of other people's images and what they're doing.
Somebody asked about whether or not it matters what kind of tree and where you for this project. No, the point is wherever you are.
Yeah.
And the tree is one that you're going to see regularly and can take some pictures of.
That's
right. If
right.
there's an important tree to you, because lots of people have very important relationships with the trees, take the one that is most important to you, and if not, take the one that's closest.
That's beside it.
Yeah.
The idea is that no matter where you are in the world, we want to capture these 10 weeks, whether the tree changes color or not, it does not matter. That's kind of the idea, right? We want to have this variation to build this truly digital forest. So it's great. Participate, enjoy
There's
it.
a question about whether or not it has to be an actual tree, and I presume you're asking about whether or not a shrub would be okay. And the difference between a tree and a shrub is actually kind of a challenging one. The best definition that I've heard is if you close your eyes and run through your forest and you run into a shrub, it doesn't hurt. If you run into a tree, you knock yourself out. So shrubs are welcome.
Yes.
But not a small indoor plant.
Well, so if that's the only thing that you can take a photo of, like there's no way of getting outside, then for the purposes of this project, yes, you can take a weekly photo of your houseplant. We'd prefer it if you could get outside. The whole idea is to breathe in some fresh air. But if you can't, then please go ahead. Also, you can take a weekly photo from Dr. Smith's weekly photo of the dairy bush. So if you really can't get outside,
Gigapan.
then you can use the gigapans. And Dr. Smith tweets them out weekly with the link. If you need the link, though, and you don't want to do it through Twitter, let us know. We'll set you up.
Go to the Google box and type dairy bush gigapan, and you'll run into one of them, and then from that you can find the rest.
Cool. Okay, I am saving this drawing because it is beautiful.
Yes, I wish I had a handlebar mustache like that.
That's a cool one, eh? Could you, like with wax?
I have had, the beard has been big enough that I 8 forks. I hid 8 forks in my beard.
8 forks,
Yeah.
wow. Okay.
That's forking big.
Okay, so I'm going to clear all of this now, and thank you very much. It's beautiful, and we have an image, and we can post it so that you can all have it.
Multiple trees would be fine. The same vantage point. You want to have the same vista.
Yeah, the exact same place.
So if it's already begun to change, that's fine.
Cool. Okay, small...
Template.
The template?
There's multiple questions about where it is.
Where is the template? So all of that should be available once you go through the quiz. It should have all of the instructions. If that's not working for you, though, send Dr. R an email, and she will set you up. Okay, Now, this very important announcement. If you are a really good note taker, or just like to take lots of notes, whether it's from the stuff that we're doing now, taking notes for the stuff we're doing now is a little bit challenging, but if you do manage to take notes, that's great. If you take lots of notes for the online stuff as well, the asynchronous stuff, and you're willing to share those notes with students who are registered with Student Accessibility Services, that would be a lovely thing to do. Also, knowing that you're taking notes for someone else tends to make your note taking a little bit more precise, and so it also helps you. If you'd like to be a volunteer note taker, here is the information to get in touch with Student Accessibility Services. We do have students right now who are registered who are requesting notes, so it would be really cool if you could volunteer to help. And we'll be posting this slide so that you can get that URL in order to sign up. So thank you very much. Cool. Okay. Stuff and things.
Oh, stuff and things.
Stuff and things. We're gonna talk about some cool stuff today. We're gonna talk about tree reading. We're gonna do some critical thinking.
Better segue. Speaking of trees.
Oh, nice. Oh, I missed it.
Yeah, it was right there.
Phylogenetic trees.
You didn't
Okay,
see
just
the
rewind.
forest for the trees.
Okay, so phylogenetic trees, and we're going to do some critical thinking, some logic thinking, some all kinds of thinking, right? Always asking ourselves, what is depicted here? What are you thinking about? Always asking yourself, what does this tree show, and what does it not show? What could it show, and what can it not show? And this is kind of where we dive into some critical thinking and some logic and things like this, right? So always testing out whether or not it is showing it or it's making an assumption of something, whether something is possible or completely impossible. And we're going to ramp this up over the next few classes. So this is just the introduction. So here's our learning outcomes for today. We're gonna start thinking about trees. We're gonna review some of the common misconceptions. We're gonna try to disrupt those, and we will apply knowledge of the phylogenetic trees. Excuse me. Just need to put it on pause for 1 second. Okay. Or do you want me to do that and then we can swap? Okay. So one of the big questions, or the origin of some of the misconceptions, comes from the question, are we descended from monkeys? And if so, why are there still monkeys? And this was a question that was first asked as soon as the hypotheses and the theories of natural selection were proposed in the 1850s. Where
Bishop Wilberforce.
Yeah, where basically people said, well, like, we can't be descended from monkeys. Monkeys are still around, so how did all that work? And of course, there was the whole sort of religious intermingling, the interpretation of creation through the religious context that obviously didn't jive with the interpretation of speciation from natural selection. And so the whole idea that we were descended from monkeys both didn't work because monkeys are still around, and also because that didn't match with the religious interpretation of creation. So, so this kind of has come along in some of the thinking associated with evolution and the lack of a willingness to adopt it as a driving theory in the scientific term, not in the common use of the word theory. So there are two uses, and in fact they're in opposition to each other, which is kind of interesting. There are a few words like that, can you think of another one where no, right on the spot. So the word dust, right? The word dust as a noun is that stuff that settles on your table that, drives you crazy. But the word dust as a verb is to actually remove that dust. And so it means itself and its opposite, essentially. And same thing with the word theory, right? The word theory in the common sense, the way that we usually use it, means that it hasn't been proven in any way. The word theory in science means that there is an overwhelming support of evidence for a particular hypothesis. In fact, there are many hypotheses such that it becomes a kind of common understanding of the way that things work. And unfortunately, it's one of those cases where it means itself in the opposite. And so sometimes there's, well, not sometimes, a lot of the times, there's this confusion where people say, well, it's only a theory. Well, no, it is a theory, which is pretty darn big. Okay, so I'm going to ask you to stop annotating if you wouldn't mind, but I'm going to keep the annotation function open because we are going to use it over the next little while. I love the monkey, though. I think that's a stick monkey. It's great. But I am going to clear it, if that's okay. Here, clearing all
Goodbye,
drawings.
monkey.
Goodbye, monkey. Okay, so moving on. When we Google evolution, this is like an image search of evolution. This is what you get. And this kind of really does help promote the idea of this misconception that we are descended from monkeys. The whole idea that evolution happens in this lineup, right? First there were monkeys, and then there were things that started to walk more upright, and then there was us, and then sometimes we go over the edge and we're hunched over a computer. I'm sure you've seen that image before. Like it's actually right here. So so all of this speaks to this common misconception, and what we want to do is we want to disrupt that for you a little bit, because it's actually a much cooler story, right? So to do that, we are going to take a look at reading phylogenetic trees. Now, you've already started to do that on the asynchronous stuff that we have online, which is great. And just today, we're going to reinforce that a little bit by thinking about 5 modern species, okay? I've got my 5 modern species here in pipe cleaners. We have blue, black, yellow, green, and red, okay? And what we're going to do is we're going to kind of construct a tree from sort of first principles, and first principles is right down here. They're all twisted together. They're all twisted together like you would see at the base of any tree, essentially, because they share a common ancestor, okay? So that's a really important initial step. And the 5 modern species are at the very tips of the tree. Okay, so if, for example, one of these species wasn't modern, wasn't around anymore, how might we go about modifying that tree so that so that it's not at the tip anymore? So hopefully, one of the things you're thinking of is we might just cut it off, right? And show that that line has ended before the modern species here. So thanks for typing that in the chat if you did. Bending it, very good. Yes, okay. So here we don't have 5 modern species, we have 4 modern species and 1 extinct, okay? 1 extinct line, okay? And of course, the modern species are only at the tips, okay? Everything below it is some other species, some other evolutionary story. Okay, and we're going to go through all of this in a second, but I just wanted to introduce you to our 5 modern species. They're kind of fun.
We'll call them polychaete worms.
Oh, no. Let's not. Let's. Okay. So, just hold off on your annotation tool. We just want to kind of present to you these 5 modern species. So we have the 5 modern species at the very tip, and I've proposed a relationship here, and we're going to start to color this in with our pipe cleaner colors, okay? So if yellow is the outgroup, using your stamp tool on your annotate menu, please stamp the one that should be yellow. Very well done. Very, very good. Okay. That's excellent. One of you has painted it yellow. Perfect. Okay. For those who stamped elsewhere, just follow us along for a little while. The reason why everyone stamped that one there, okay, you can stop stamping. The reason why everybody stamped there is because the outgroup is the one that is least closely related, but still shares a common ancestor eventually in history, right? And again, we don't actually have like time in increments here. We just know that down here is much more in the past than up here. So the outgroup in your tree is the one that branches off first. Do you wanna person this, or are you?
My hands are fully
your
occupied.
Your hands are fully occupied. Okay.
But I can grow some more.
Okay. So the outgroup is basically going to look, if yellow is the outgroup, then the outgroup is going to look like this. Okay. So just bear with me here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to twist the other ones. Why am I twisting the other ones together and not just having this come off like this and then the other ones come off? And the reason is because they share a common evolutionary path after the outgroup has branched off. Okay?
Yep, okay. So common ancestor, more closely related. Yep.
Yep, there's a common ancestor here somewhere, right? Okay, cool. Let's keep on going. So yellow is the outgroup. Now, blue and red are sister taxa. If this one up here is blue, which one is red? Super. Yes, excellent. Nice and simple, right? Okay. So in order to twist, though, why am I going all the way up? Why am I not stopping here, for example? Why am I going to continue to twist quite far up?
Suggestions because they are still evolving together, because they are even more closely related.
That's it. They're even more closely related. If they are sister taxa, then they are the most closely related, right, to each other. And so they share really quite an intimate evolutionary history. And they do share a common ancestor that is very recent. That's the kind of the whole point of sister taxa. Okay, great. This is good. I'm glad it's kind of working. Okay, so far. Ready for the next one? So we'll get you to stop annotating. And, the next one is just to show you here in graphical form. So this is what we've got. We've got our outgroup. We've got our 2 here. And now we have to resolve our 2 here. Okay? Now, could it be like this?
Sure could. You can rotate any of those nodes, remember. You can twist them around.
Yep. And then could we have 2 just coming out together like this?
You could.
You totally could. What would that mean if this was the resolved tree? If black and green just came out from a single node, what might that imply?
Literally.
It could literally imply, we don't know. It hasn't yet been resolved. We don't know whether green moves up the tree for a little bit and then branches off, or if black does. Is it also possible that this is the way that it went, that this is the story?
A cladist would say no.
A cladist would say no. I guess it is possible, very unlikely, but possible, that what happened was that in this speciation event, this common ancestor went off in this direction, and then 2 others came from this node. But again, very unlikely. You definitely want to take a look at this and try to resolve it. So let's try to resolve that right now with the following statement. Okay, so clear.
All the drawings.
Okay. Oh. Green is more closely related to red than black. So which one is green?
You guys are on this.
You guys are totally on the ball. Okay.
That must be the Carly Rae Jepsen.
Yeah. That's great. Okay.
It's
now.
not showing up.
Oh, It's showing up for me,
Yeah, I know.
not for you. Okay. For those of you who maybe have some slower internet like Smith here,
Because it's a different.
because it's what I don't understand. But everybody's kind of coloring the one that's just one down from the sister taxa. So basically what you're saying is then that this one is green. So we're going to follow up and show you on the video screen what you're doing on the actual screen. There we go. Okay. So here we go. Now, very important that green is more closely related to red than black isn't because green is closer along the tips. It's because green has a common ancestor with red that is much more recent than the common ancestor that red has with black. This is going back in time, right? The axis is back in time. And that's a really important misconception that needs to be fixed. In fact, it's a misconception, this whole idea about this one being more closely related to this one because it is more closely related in line, is one that biologists make in interpreting evolutionary history. We see lots of examples of this, but it's actually looking along the nodes that tells you. So the closer to the root of the tree, the further back it is, the less related it is when you're doing the relationships. Okay, cool. So here's our tree, right? Here's our tree here. Here's our tree there. It is a resolved tree in that we have an order of branching that tells a story, right?
And there are no polytomies. So branchings that come out like we just demonstrated where red or green and black would come out from the same point.
That's right. A polytomy is unresolved. It's when we had the green and the black together. Okay. So now we have this particular order. In fact, it was this way, right? Now let's convert our tree to the way that we see it here, simply by taking this node and rotating it a little bit. Okay. Oh, okay. So we're going to rotate it right over here. Does that change the relationship in any way? If we take this and we twist it this way, somebody's writing no. That's right.
Yep, there's some thoughts in the chat that say no.
Yeah.
And they are correct.
You're totally correct. So if red is here or if red is here, it doesn't change the interpretation of the tree, right? It does not matter the order along the tips. It only matters what's going on in the branching. So similarly, if we start to rotate all of these in just unorganized ways, which would make me bananas. Okay, but if we did it this way, I don't like looking at it that way. It's very disorganized. And still, the story is the same, right? Still, green is more closely related to red than black is. Still, red and blue are sister taxa, and still yellow is the outgroup.
So why might that be important in terms of thinking about a tree? Some common misconceptions about evolution that Dr. Jacobs talked about include, from that Google search and the image search, the idea of a progression. And sometimes people, when looking at a fully resolved cladogram or a phylogeny that's laid out nicely with branching, they sometimes bring to that tree their incorrect thinking that, well, if I start here and I end here, then I have progressed. And so changing how the relationships are displayed in your phylogeny, in your tree, is actually sometimes helpful for breaking up, because it's just as if we had a great big wad of pipe cleaners, we could display this, instead of displaying it like a fan, we could display it like a circle and still correctly display the relationships. We could bring in a third dimension and still correctly display the relationships that do not show progression.
So thank you for that, because the progression the progression thing is important. The progression thing puts humans at the top of something, right? It it makes us like the dominant, right? It makes us sort of the supreme being, the reason for evolution.
Which is kind of really tied into a whole bunch of nasty parts, colonial, racist parts of the history of biology. Because we didn't just think that humans were the top. We thought within humans that there was a hierarchy as well. And it's just like...
Yeah.
Incorrect evolutionary thinking. Incorrect application of evolutionary thinking.
So to say that humans have been evolving for longer than other things is completely incorrect. Remember, evolution is not natural selection. Evolution is simply change over time. So bacteria have been around for as long as humans have and have been evolving for just as much, if not more, way more time, right? Because they've been around for longer. Everything is always evolving, and if it's at the tips, it's been evolving for the same amount of time, okay? Just it may not be in that form, but everything has been evolving in the same amount of time, okay? So, thank you. That brings us to the next part of our discussion, which is, again, another sort of human applied concept that can be misunderstood or misused. And so we wanted to talk a little bit about what a clade is and be very specific about what a clade is.
So what is a clade? What is a clade? So it's a group, it's basically a group of organisms that consists of a common ancestor and all of its descendants. It's derived from a Greek root meaning branch, but it's basically to have something called a clade in our tree-based thinking, it has to have two elements. It has to include the common ancestor and all, how many? Some?
All.
Most.
All.
Nearly all.
No, all.
All of the descendants. So within that categorization, we talk more specifically with a near synonym of clade is something can be monophyletic. So mono, solo, one, and phyletic, meaning the group of branches. So monophyletic is a clade. A clade is by definition a monophyletic thing. Now, there can be, and historically, remember these phylogenies, these branching diagrams represent the best for our visualization of the best information that we have right now. So they are a hypothesis. They're not the truth. There's no truthiness to this at all. It's our interpretation of the best information we have right now. So we can go easily into the literature and find examples where we have names that we use that you know as biologists, as citizens, for things that are not monophyletic. So a paraphyletic thing can be, it's not a clade, but it's a name that's applied to something that's missing either the common ancestor or at least one dependent. And if you've got great big young eyes better than mine, you can look at that clade that's in the bottom that we sourced from a something called the Wikipedia. And so we're looking at these valid names of things and saying, okay, so the yellow group there, that's a monophyletic clade. You may be familiar with the blue circling as something called reptiles. Reptiles is not monophyletic because it doesn't include at least one descendant, the birds. And warm-blooded isn't monophyletic because it includes only in red the mammals and the birds, but misses all the intervening branches. So there's a number of there's a number of ways of being not monophyletic, quite creative ways, and often for interesting evolutionary reasons. We'll talk about convergent evolution and loss in a couple of days, in a couple of moments. But in some cases, it's just because the phylogeny was based on information we had at the time, and then we learned better and new information. Yeah, so are birds dinosaurs? Yes, they sure are. So if you're doing a Christmas bird count, just it kind of razzle-dazzles it up if you talk about the Christmas dinosaur count that you're doing in your backyard.
So somebody says, wait, then warm blood evolved twice separately. No. Well, okay. The yes and no. Maybe. Dinosaurs warm-blooded. Maybe. Yes. Some of them. Maybe. We're not sure. That needs to be resolved. The warm-blooded that we understand seems to have evolved once, and then there are some freaky fish out there who are technically warm-blooded in that they produce their own internal heat. And so it is possible, but the whole warm-blooded thing is kind of like a
It's a description more
evolving topic.
than a nice
Yeah.
phylogenetic category. It's a description because
Yeah.
there are insects that create their own heat.
Yes. Okay. We have a question for you, and we're going to set up a mentee for this.
This one I have not done yet, so...
Okay, so you work through this. We're going to set up a mentee in just a few seconds. You'll be able to choose A, B, C, D, or E on the mentee. So keep this screen for the actual options. Work through it. Don't put the answer down. Please don't annotate. Let everyone figure it out on their own, and we'll send you the mentee code in just a second. You can open up a mentee browser, though.
Okay, so www.mentee.com 77088994.
Oh, sorry. There's a typo here. This one is supposed to be black, not white. We changed colors, and we didn't get that one. So here, I'll rewrite the question so that you can see it. There you go. Numbers of participants, 44 of you. So 44 of you have put in the answer. We'll just wait for quite a few more of you to work through this.
67.
Code doesn't work for me. Let's do the code again.
Code is pasted into...
It's pasted into the chat. I think maybe I had a typo. You want to give me the code again?
77088994.
There we go. Thanks everyone who's helping. Yep, I had a typo. I'm sorry about that. You can try it again. Cool.
200. When we're above 250, maybe let's...
Okay.
And
we are. Okay, so thank you very much. The overwhelming majority have selected the correct answer. I'll just circle it here for you. Here we go. Drawing. The correct answer is B. Okay, so yellow and black are not a clade. And remember, because a clade, in the definition of a clade, is based upon the presence of two things. There's a recipe, right? You need to have the common ancestor included of all of the things that descend from it, okay? So if we include the modern species yellow and black, we do have a common ancestor in that yellow and black do share a common ancestor, right? Right here. And then if that's where the common ancestor is, though, we have completely excluded all of these here. So it doesn't include all of the descendants. Okay? That's what a clade is. It needs to have a common ancestor, and then from that common ancestor, all of the descendants that come from it. And so yellow and black are not a clade. Good. Great. And so we've said this a few times, but we wanted to just kind of highlight the fact that these nodes on this type of tree represent an entire speciation event, right? Remember, if we have, different strains of a virus along the tips, then those nodes might very well represent a mutation event, for example. But that's not what this tree is. And the way that you know it is by us telling you what's at the tips, okay? Otherwise, you wouldn't know. You just know that there's differentiation that happens at those nodes, right? And so you need to have a scale, just like a map has a scale. You need to have a scale when you talk about phylogenetic trees.
And you can have phylogenetic trees that, like Dr. Jacob said, that you need to read the scale bar.
That's right.
Because they can be not at a species level.
That's right. So in order for speciation to happen, you have to have what's called a barrier to gene flow. Gene flow has to stop. Do you remember what...
Stop to the hand.
Stop. Do you remember what gene flow was?
Sisterhood of the Traveling Pants. Am I helping?
No. Do you remember what gene flow is? Gene flow, remember flow of genes that are flowing from one population to another. So you have individuals through immigration and emigration, swapping populations, but not only just going there for vacation, leaving a bit of themselves behind. So there's got to be reproduction, right, for gene flow to happen, where you have immigration and emigration, the exchange of genes across populations. We're running out of batteries on the mic. Do we have some batteries?
Yeah, there should be some batteries in there.
Nope, we have ran through those.
We've already gone through them?
Yeah, we might need some more batteries.
All right.
Okay, for now though, you know what I'll do is I will switch to the other mic, or just leave it until it dies.
Maybe just leave it till
Okay.
it dies.
Let us know in the
tell us
chat if you can't hear us. Yeah. Okay. So speciation events happen when there's a barrier to gene flow, when gene flow stops, when a population is essentially genetically isolated. Okay. And so with that, we're going to follow up with some stuff that was from the online content. Just go back. We're going to throw a mentee question at you. Here you go. Here it is. And in just a second, we'll share with you the code.
Same code, 7708894. Put that back in, 7708.
Okay. I'm going to go get some batteries.
I will curate.
Okay.
I'll stay.
Do you know where the batteries are?
In the cupboard above the counter with that holds the compost.
Okay.
Now you all know where our batteries are.
Box of 3 batteries.
Oh, there's going to mic batteries replaced.
Okay.
Oh yeah, good old mic battery.
Is that good? Can we be
Yep,
heard?
they can
Yeah?
hear you
Okay,
now.
great.
Yeah, walkers.
Okay.
Nice.
The tree on the right shows that frogs are more closely related to fish than to humans. The tree on the right. Okay. Shows that we're more closely related to humans than other species. The tree on the right shows that the clade of humans and mice share the most recent common ancestor. The tree on the
So there was early on in the voting, there was a horse race between two that's now diversified, but that's a good reason to remember in all votes, make sure you stay till the end.
I think we might have another question coming up.
Oh yeah?
Maybe.
I'll go look for it.
Oh yeah, good.
No.
No? Okay.
So right now we have almost 200 votes. We'll wait I guess, till 200. And we have 200.
Yay! More. We have a bit of time.
Not so much.
Not so much? You have big plans?
There will be dancing. I'm going to dance all night. I'm going to dance. Not right, and you can't make me stop. I'm going to spread.
Cool. How are we doing?
We're good. We have 1 million.
We have 1 million participants?
Yeah.
No. Okay. It does seem to have plateaued, which is great. Okay. So the overwhelming majority, and we're doing this on 2 computers. That's why we can't show you exactly, unless we turn Smith's computer around. The overwhelming majority, here, I will circle it for you, has the correct answer. And it's A, right here. So it's false.
Actually, if this updates, I just put it in the slides.
Oh, cool. We'll have it for you for the slides when we download the slides. It doesn't update it, but I would have to stop sharing and it would be a mess.
It's a mess.
It's a mess. Okay, so the false answer, so the statement that is false, which means the correct answer of the question, is A. And so the tree on the right shows that frogs are more closely related to fish than to humans, and that is not correct.
Now, the one that competed with it early on in the voting was E.
Was E.
So
Some
remember,
of you.
that's what's happened between the left side and the right side is basically just rotating around the nodes. And that's doesn't change the information, that just changes how you look at it.
Yeah, so if you're confused about E, start from the base and say, which one in this one over here, this one here, is the outgroup? Right? And it's the fish. Fish is the outgroup. Then you go over here and you say, which one in this one is the outgroup? And then, oh, also the fish. So far they're the same, right? Now, moving up to a next node, which one then in this smaller clade is the outgroup? And it's the frog. And over here, you go over to the smaller clade and you say, which one is now the outgroup? And it's also the frog. So you're like, okay, so far it's the same thing, right? Moving up to the next node, which one now in the smaller clade is the outgroup? And it's the lizard. And then here, moving up and look at the smaller clade, the first to go off is the lizard. And then now, moving up, of course, you see that the mouse and the human are sister taxa. So they are closely related, and you see that here as well. So it is the same tree.
Yeah, so lefted and rightedness doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter.
So the baby,
Okay.
they're showing the same things there.
Okay, cool. I see a whole bunch of questions. You want me to work through this a little bit more? I'm going to guess.
Well, one of the things that's come up in the at least once in the chat, and since we haven't talked about, or we always have an opportunity as these come up to in terms of how to answer multiple choice questions with this one in particular, but also in general, is you missed false. So as you're writing these things in this class, in other classes, make sure that you go through and read the question carefully. You're always going to have a chance to kind of sketch your answer down, whether it's if you're in person in pencil, if you're at home also in pencil before you enter it into D2L or whatever the quiz-based format is. But take a chance to have you repeat it to yourself slowly in your mind's ear and go, what am I looking for here?
Yeah. Okay, it takes practice, and you know, when we put this question up, we had to work through it to figure out which one it was,
and
right?
maybe you heard Dr. Jacobs was saying to herself, "This is to themselves. This is what I'm looking for.
That's right.
Is what I'm looking for."
Okay. Clear all drawings. Thank you, and please feel free to work through these. Right. So, how can you make these statements false? How can you make the other one true? Yep. How can you play around with it? And one of the things that works for me is when I see, okay, the tree on the right shows that frogs are more closely related to fish than to humans. I cover the actual phylogeny and I say, what do I need to see in order for this to be true? And then I look for it. And if I can't see it, then you know that it's a false statement, right? So yeah, you can kind of in your mind's eye figure out what.
Yeah, so is this the type of question to expect to see on a midterm? Sure. Yep.
Can I go through it again for A? Yes. The tree on the right shows that frogs are more closely related to fish than to humans. What do I need to see in order for that to be true? So if fish are more closely related to frogs than to humans, you would imagine then that fish and frogs... Sorry, I'm getting fish and... Let's start. Whoa, okay. Shows that frogs are more closely related to fish. So if frogs are more closely related to fish than to humans, their common ancestor should be higher up along this tree than the common ancestor with humans. Okay? So if frogs are more closely related to fish, their common ancestor needs to be higher up on the tree. Let's take a look at where that common ancestor is of the frog and the fish. The frog and the fish, the common ancestor of the fish and the frog, is actually just down here, right? Now take a look at where the common ancestor between the human and the frog is, and it's here. Right? There's the frog, there's the human, here's their common ancestor when you follow the lines down, okay? So the frog and the human are more closely related to each other than the human is to the fish, than the frog is to the fish. The fish is equally closely related to the frog and the human because the common ancestor of the fish and the frog is here, and the fish and the human is also here. It means that they are equally closely related. Play that video back once we post it if you need to. Okay.
So this is a good point that comes up often in playing back these discussions, and sometimes people get confused if we say, okay, so the mouse and the human, but wait a second, there's other things that happen there. And that's what this slide talks about, is that when we have only one representative of lineage that's pictured, that we're not saying that there has not been a lot of other branching on that lineage as well, and there has, as you can see here. If we talk about deuterostomes, that there are close relatives, broadly speaking, being sea cucumbers, echinoderms, crinoids, and the other one, starfish. There's lots of other things that aren't there. It's a matter of what we can picture at one time.
Yeah. So lots and lots of other primates going on in this tree. And it doesn't mean that they're not there. So remember that whole thing about what does this tree show? What does it not show? What is definitely not possible and what is possible? And the whole idea of it's possible that there are many species represented here is absolutely accurate in the way that you read a tree. Similarly, remember we've been talking about time. It's important, and we've said this before, but this kind of just sets it up for you in a more mathematical way if that's the way you like to visualize it. Everything that's at the tip has been evolving for the same amount of time. That doesn't mean that the degree of change has been the same, right? Mutation rates may be different in different species, but the time is exactly the same. And only if it gets bent off earlier, right, does it mean that it actually has stopped evolving, right? That line went extinct. But everything has been for the same amount of time. So fish have been evolving for the same amount of time as humans, bacteria for the same amount of time as fish. Everything that's extant, everything that exists, has been evolving for the same amount of time.
So coming back to this question that we opened up with, that maybe you've been wrestling with yourself, maybe you've been around dinner tables with family members or friends where this came up. So are we descended from monkeys? And looking at this from an evolutionary perspective, a tree-based perspective, the answer is, of course, yes and no. So, are we descended from monkeys? Well, no, not from any modern monkeys. All of these things are extant taxa. These are extant primates that we share close relationships with. And
yeah, sorry.
Yes, in the sense that we are all still monkeys.
So there you go. No linear progression, right? It's all about how our common ancestors were related, right?
So just in the last couple of seconds here, this tree-based thinking is sometimes, in different years, different individuals who've taken this course, we sometimes have hands going up when we're sharing a face-to-face experience that say, well, so this seems pretty esoteric. I don't really understand how this pertains to my day-to-day life. I'm guessing because of the pandemic and because of news coverage of COVID and the movement of COVID and things like that, you may be more intuitively tuned into the fact that phylogeny is a really useful hard tool in our day-to-day life. But we're going to drop back kind of a generation from a pandemic perspective and give you one last kind of tragic example about the power of phylogeny. And it has to do with an outbreak, a particularly small but virulent outbreak of HIV that led to AIDS in Florida, in a town in Florida in the mid-80s. And at the time, there was a whole bunch of things that we didn't know. And there was a whole bunch of things that people willfully, mistruths, untruths that people willfully propagated. And so it was, socially, it was an incredibly challenging time as this virus, this zoonotic virus spread across the world, the human world. The problem, or what happened in Florida that people were really confused by and that phylogeny helped us to a degree figure out, was an outbreak amongst people that appeared to us to have no connection to any of the known ways that HIV could be transmitted. They weren't intravenous drug users. They hadn't experienced a blood transfusion. They didn't share multiple sexual partners. There was a whole bunch of these things that led us to predict that perhaps they were in a greater risk group than others, and that this outgroup of patients in Florida had none of these. And so that was a little bit terrifying into a world that didn't understand how this disease was transmitted, how this virus was transmitted. This was particularly terrifying. And what happened was, it turned out that there was a shared element to their history, and this is what was written about, and that small diagram in Science, that is a phylogeny that shows a gene that codes for an envelope in the HIV virus. And I went to GenBank, which is a place where all these sequences are deposited, and I remade the figure to show you actually the sequences, and I expanded it to the full range of sequences that they considered. But what the CDC did at the time, including Anthony Fauci, a much younger Anthony Fauci, Dr. Anthony Fauci, that many of you know now, was that they used genetics to look for close relatives of the outbreak, the cluster of unknown how did this disease get transmitted patients, and the potential solution or the potential cause, which was in fact a dentist, their shared dentist, who in the meantime had died of complications arising from AIDS. And so what they compared was the sequence, the HIV sequence from the dentist to the outgroup patients who didn't have any other explanatory variables in their past. And then they bunched it with all of the variability of the HIV virus that was known at the time. And what they found, and maybe you could even quickly, since you're still coolly annotating, so this was the question that they were asking, and based on this tree, if the HIV infection was from the dentist, where the red star is, where on that phylogeny would you expect to find the infected patients if the dentist was the source of the infection? So jump in and annotate on that phylogeny with a stamp. Boom, 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 boom. This is great. This is going to be a really good question to go back to later on, because as I can see, even right from now, there is differing. This is really cool. Lots of opinions there. So let's erase that so I can show you in the next slide.
Oh, sorry. There we go.
So in this phylogenetic way of looking at the viral proteins, from HIV, we would expect to find the patients clustered around the dentist if the dentist was the source. And that's in fact what was found.
So remember, this tree is a mutation tree,
Yeah.
right? Where each of those nodes represents a mutation event instead of a speciation event, right? Otherwise, it wouldn't be HIV that would be at the tips. It would be different viruses, completely different, not just different forms of the same virus.
And we would have to define what a viral species is anyhow.
Which is impossible.
Impossible to do. So the problem here, or this has resolved two things. It's given closure to the families. Most of those victims died, unfortunately. Some of them are still alive. Two of them, to my knowledge, are still alive. You can read about them. And the advocacy that they've done since then in terms of normalizing HIV infections, and I can post some links later on. You can go and read about that. What this didn't do, because the Dr. Acker in this case, died before any of this was resolved, it doesn't resolve how it actually happened. And so we know because of this similarity that he was the source, but we don't know, was it willful? Was it an accident? Was it just a number of small accidents? And so there's some closure, but of course, as with all tragic stories, there's not entirely closure. Mm-hmm. So this is just kind of one example of the day-to-day particular medical applications of phylogeny. There's tons and tons of others.
I love all these questions.
Yeah.
Lots and lots of questions are coming. And so maybe, Dr. Smith, do you want to jump on the chat and try to answer some of those? Sure. And we will, in the remaining couple of minutes, just throw some, what do we do with this kind of questions, answers at you. We talked a lot about phylogenetic trees. We went through very quickly some of the misconceptions and the assumptions that are involved in reading a tree. And if you'd like some guidance on what you can do in order to kind of further engage with this stuff, obviously you can go through the slides, you can go through the questions. Don't just kind of go, okay, I know that the answer is B. Kind of work out, how could you make this statement correct? How could you make it false? And really try to explain why the answer is the way that it is. The other thing you can do is a little bit of homework, if you'd like. This might help. What you can do is if we have mussels that are represented by the colors that we were using for the pipe cleaners, you can imagine that these are the 5 extant species, and one of the things that you can do is you can construct different trees. So here are the tips, right? And then the whole idea is to construct different stories, different trees that have different relationships, and then to work through those, right? To understand which ones are more closely related to each other, and how changing the order of the branching can change that relationship while keeping this order along the tips exactly the same. So hopefully that'll be helpful to just work through this slide, and to give you lots of things to work with as we get closer to the midterm. We will be asking you to draw a tree or two, and so get used to drawing trees that show different things, and we will be asking you to interpret trees. So that's really going to be kind of the primary focus of the midterm, of course, everything that we've done so far. And then if you want to apply, so some of these things kind of start to bring together the tree stuff that we've done, as well as the vocabulary that we've learned, and how to apply some of these things. Here's a question that you can work through. So based on the difference between these lures, which statement about these two species is not supported? So there's a whole bunch of true statements. You're looking for the false statement, okay? We don't use double negatives ever, but we do talk about which one is not supported, right? Which hypothesis is not plausible. And just to kind of really demonstrate the idea that when you have an observation like these two types of lures, there are multiple interpretations that are plausible, right? And there are some that are definitely not. So go through this. It's a challenging question, and it's not meant to be answerable within the first 2 seconds of looking at it. Work through it, work through the terms, and hopefully that'll help focus your studying.
So there's we've kind of exceeded our time, but then there's some questions on the chat. We'll keep going through and answering them here in text, and so you can look at those later on. And there's also us going to stick around with Dr. Robertson, who has arrived. Boop boop ka-choo, Dr. Robertson. And yeah.
Take care.
Lovely. You wait till you see what the music is on Wednesday.
I'm scared. We'll just shut down for a couple minutes to regroup, and then we'll be back for anyone who wants to stick around.
While Dr.